Hey, what's up there, YouTubers? It's me again, Brian, aka Gamer 55551. Excuse me. And I am back with a video review. And for this review, we're going to be taking a look at Borderlands Legendary Collection, a collection of three of the Borderlands games. Borderlands, first one, Borderlands the pre-sequel, and Borderlands 2, which these are based off the Game of the Year editions available for the Nintendo Switch. The Game of the Year editions are also available on other systems like the PS4, Xbox One, and PC via Steam, with Borderlands, Game of the Year edition came out last year, and a couple of years ago we had Borderlands the Handsome Jack collection though. Now, when it comes to first-person shooters, there are several out there that I do like. Games like, Doom and Wolfenstein, which are fast-paced and over-the-top, and those games are enjoyable. But there are also games that are not fast-paced and over-the-top, but still fun, mainly the Borderlands series. This is a series I've really become a big fan of because I love the whole world and the world of Pandora and the universe, and the gameplay itself still remains as enjoyable as it was. The whole idea of not only a looter shooter, but combining the idea of a first-person shooters with RPG elements. I've become sort of a big fan of that. And while there have been other looter shooters out there, I feel it's like none of them have ever catched up to, say, like the Borderlands series in general. So it was sort of the idea of Borderlands coming to a Nintendo system has always been, for a lot of Nintendo fans, or shall we say Nintendo fans out there, that was something like a lot of us wanted to see happen, but no one knew if it was going to happen or not. When Switch came out though, there were reports coming out how Gearbox was talking to Nintendo, but then those talks stopped. Then we got basically someone treating Randy Pitchford, the guy who runs Gearbox, aka the guy who lied to us about alien colonial marines. I like to point that out. Basically, someone asked about Borderlands 2 coming to the Nintendo Switch, and well, he basically put out a statement that says, put 1 million tweets out and it would happen. And while I just felt like I wasn't sold on that, like I just had the feeling that even if 1 million tweets were made, I just feel somehow this would be an example of them somehow find a way to move the goalposts and so forth. Not to mention, Borderlands 2 was released on a handheld, the PlayStation Vita, and well, that didn't exactly sit well with everybody. So, as much as for a lot of us would love to see Borderlands come to the Nintendo Switch, a lot of us didn't know if it was going to happen or not. But then we started to see, earlier this year, listings at the time of 2K games possibly coming to the Nintendo Switch. One of them were XCOM and BioShock, and it was sort of interesting to see if anything else, like Borderlands or anything like that, was going to happen. But during Nintendo's Direct, 2K put out a trailer, and not only were they bringing BioShock and XCOM over, but they were also bringing in Borderlands. On top of that, it was basically bringing Borderlands the pre-sequel, and Borderlands 2. And well, now that we have all three games have been out, and now we have this one out as well, and while it's not 100% perfect, Borderlands Legendary Collection for Nintendo Switch, I will say, is a good port, even if there is one area I still am not a little iffy, and this has to do with how 2K has handled at least some of the ways they handle in terms of physical media, at least the physical version when it comes to the physical version of the Nintendo Switch. So now why don't we get started with the pros and cons, and we'll start off first with the pros, and that is games actually run very well on the Nintendo Switch. Basically, for those who are not familiar, basically all three versions were run at 1080p, 30 frames per second, and I believe 720p at 30 frames per second when in portable mode and all, and they hold up very well. I haven't seen anything where the frame rate dips or anything major that would affect the gameplay and all that stuff. So as far as it running on the Nintendo Switch, all three of them run perfectly fine, and the visuals still hold up. I still like that graphic novel look to the game and all that stuff, so it runs very well, and visually it still holds up very well indeed. The next thing I do want to talk about is the gameplay, and the gameplay is still enjoyable. For those who are not familiar with it, though, it's basically a looter shooter and a mixture of RPGs with first-person shooters and all that stuff. Basically, every gun you find in the game will have different attributes. Some of them will be stronger than the others. Others may have certain abilities, like maybe adding shock or fire or anything like that, which could come in handy when you're taking on different enemies, and there are different varieties of guns. I mean, hell, you may be looking at one place and you find like a more powerful gun, or you may buy one like at a vending machine. You could also sell them as well. And it's not only guns, there's also mods for like your grenades that have different effects, and even shields that can help, protect you and all that stuff, so you don't like lose your life and all that stuff. Of course, once your shield depletes though, you have to, pending that you're not being attacked, you have to wait for it to recharge and so forth though. And some shields also can slowly regenerate your health. Each shield's a bit different and so on. But the gameplay is still enjoyable, not to mention the world and the story of Borderlands, especially Handsome Jack, who is like I believe is a fan favorite villain and all that stuff. And it's just, the gameplay is still fun. All three of them have enjoyable gameplay though. Pre-sequel is interesting because this one adds the element of not only low gravity but also your oxygen level, because since you'll be on the moon of Pandora though, you're not going to be able to breathe, and you have to have sort of they call an Aulx kit, and basically when it depletes though, you start losing your health because there's no oxygen and so forth, so you have to find pockets of area to refill like your Aulx kit or anything like that. But either way, the gameplay is still fun. I love the whole looter shooter and the whole first-person shooter mixed with RPG element. And last but not least is the content. And there is plenty of content in this game. This game basically, I believe, adds all the DLCs from Borderlands 1, the pre-sequel, and Borderlands 2. The only one missing, I think it's the Commander Lilith at this time, and that one's being developed for the other versions of Borderlands 2. Whether or not that comes to the Nintendo Switch or not remains to be seen at this time, but as of right now, but even so, you're getting a whole lot of content in this game, and that's going to keep people busy for a while, especially if you're playing it in a single player like me, or playing it in multiplayer, whether it's locally or online as well. But either way, there's a whole lot of content in this game that should definitely keep you busy for a while. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we're going to get to part 2, the cons. So we'll take a quick break, and we will be right back. Okay, and we are back with part 2 of our video review of Borderlands, the Legendary Collection for the Nintendo Switch. So now that I gave you the pros, why don't we get started with the cons? And there are only 3 cons I could think of. One that I think is probably the biggest one, and this could have an impact depending on if you're still planning to get the Switch version, whether to go digital or physical, but it is still worth pointing out. We'll start off with the first one, and that is that if you're going into this game expecting like something brand new or anything like that, I would say don't expect really anything new if you already played these games before, whether you played it on the PS3 or the PS4 or even on PC via Steam or anything like that. It's the same game that was released on those other systems as well. So for those who never play it, this might be a new experience for them, but for those who've already played it, unless portability is the big thing right there, unless that's really a big deal, plus you don't mind the game running at 30 frames per second or anything like that, you're not going to find anything new in the Borderlands Legendary Collection. It's basically the Game of the Year edition it's basically the Switch version of the Game of the Year edition and all that stuff. So again, that doesn't mean the game's horrible. Just bear in mind, if you played other versions before, don't expect anything drastically new if you've already played pre-sequel or Borderlands 2 or Borderlands. The next one I do want to talk about is the frame rate, and it is worth pointing out though that the game does run at 30 frames per second. And that's not necessarily bad. As I mentioned earlier, it ran pretty well. I didn't find any issues or any drop or anything in the frame rates or anything like that. That being said, I will admit it would have been nice if they were able to get it to run at 60 frames per second, like the Borderlands Game of the Year edition, or the Handsome Jack collection, which is Borderlands pre-sequel and Borderlands 2. So, I mean, running at 30 frames per second doesn't make the game, make it terrible or anything like that? No, it doesn't. It still plays well and all that stuff. It's just that it would have been nice if basically it ran at 60 frames per second. And the last but not least thing, and this one I think is the big one, and this one has to do is for those who are thinking about buying the physical version. First, the good news and the bad news. The good news is that the physical version does have a cartridge in it, so you will be able to play the game. It's not one of those you get an empty box and it has a download paper. That said, however, there is a catch to it, and this is sort of something common that 2K is known for in terms of porting their games to the Nintendo Switch. See games like their NBA 2K games as well, and that is this one. It requires a hefty download, and according to the package, you're going to be looking at basically needing 42 gigabytes of space in order to play Borderlands on the Nintendo Switch, especially if you're planning to get the physical version, compared to the Nintendo eShop version, where you can basically buy them separately if you want to do that. Though basically it's because the cartridge only has the first Borderlands, the Game of the Year edition, and that requires a bit of a download as well, while the other two, you basically get a code in the case here, and you basically, in other words, a piece of paper to be exact, where you basically have to enter in the code to download Borderlands 2 and Borderlands the pre-sequel, and depending on your internet connection, it could take a while. For me, it took like about an hour each just to download Borderlands the pre-sequel and Borderlands 2. So it's a bit of a buyer's beware for those who are planning to get the physical version. You will need 42 gigabytes of space in your Nintendo Switch, which means you may have to consider the idea of upgrading your micro SD card, though. If you're one of those, like me, that managed to get the 1 terabyte micro SD card for your Nintendo Switch, this shouldn't be a really huge issue. But for others out there, you may have to look into the idea of upgrading your micro SD card on the Nintendo Switch, especially if you want to play games like Borderlands on the Nintendo Switch. Overall, Borderlands Legendary Collection for the Nintendo Switch is still a good game and all. The gameplay still holds up very well, even though if you played it on other systems and it doesn't offer anything new, it's still a fun game, especially if you never played the Borderlands games before. Yes, it runs at 30 frames per second, so it's not the 60 frames per second, but it runs at a very stable 30 frames per second. And the big sticking point is, for those who are planning to get the physical version, you're going to have to empty out some spaces on your micro SD card and leave enough space for it, 42 gigabytes. And that's where there's a bit of a buyer's beware for the physical version. But I will say these games are still enjoyable nevertheless. If you're willing to bite the bullet on the physical version and the 42 gigabytes requirement isn't a big deal, let alone you're not bothered with the 30 frames per second and your portability is a big deal, then yeah, Borderlands Legendary Collection is still a fun game, and I still think it's worth owning if the Switch is your main console and so forth. If you have it on PC or PS4 or Xbox One, unless you view portability as a big thing, then just skip the Switch version and stick with that version. But if the Switch is your main console, I would say give Borderlands a look. I thought it was a fun game. I still think all three of them are so fun. Hopefully, if you decide to get it, you enjoy it as much as I do. And if this game does well enough in the Nintendo Switch, I'm hoping, there's no guarantee, but I'm hoping that Borderlands 3 can come to the Nintendo Switch. I know some people will think that's unlikely and all that stuff, but being how that runs on Unreal Engine 4 and the Switch supports Unreal Engine 4, it's not out of the realm of possibilities or anything like that. But we'll see if that ever happens. But overall, I definitely will say I definitely enjoyed the Borderlands Legendary Collection for the Nintendo Switch. Okay, this concludes my video review of Borderlands Legendary Collection for the Nintendo Switch. And again, these are my opinion. What are yours? What are your thoughts about Borderlands Legendary Collection for the Nintendo Switch? Are you glad that they brought the Borderlands series over to the Nintendo Switch? Have you played the Switch version? Have you enjoyed that version? Do you think it's worth picking up the Switch version? Or do you believe it's better to stick with the PS4, Xbox One, or the PC version instead? Does the 42 gigabyte, is that an download, is that an issue? Or is that really a non-issue at all? Do you think this can open the door to the possibility of Borderlands 3 coming to the Nintendo Switch? Or do you think that's unlikely to happen? Are there any other 2K games you think should come to the Nintendo Switch? Do you agree with what I said in this video? Do you disagree? Do you have a difference of opinion? As always, sound off in the comment section below. Let me know what you think. And if you like this video, I hope you hit the like button. I would appreciate it. And I hope you do subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you do, make sure you hit the bell icon for notifications of any new videos I put up. Also, feel free to share this video if you want to, and feel free to donate to my channel if you like. You could do it through PayPal me or Patreon. Links will be in the description down below of this video. And I will see you again next time when I do another video. Hopefully that'll be soon. Until then, from Southern California, wish you all a good day then. Bye!